This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the shocking rise of anti-Semitism around the world, sparked by the war between Hamas and Israel. Plus, a warning from an Israeli expert that Hezbollah represents a much greater threat than Hamas. And friends and family mourn the passing of Eilat Mazar, called by some the Queen of Jerusalem archaeology. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. It's open season on Jews and a shocking spike of anti-Semitism. They're being savagely attacked in American cities from Los Angeles to New York. So how are certain political leaders fueling these heinous crimes? And what can we do to stop this torrent of anti-Semitism? Dale Hurd has the story.
Phone video of attacks against Jews in cities across the U.S. shared on social media show how Palestinian supporters are bringing the war against Israel and against Jews to America's streets. Jews around the world know that when Israel is attacked and fights back, they become even bigger targets for violence. A Jewish man was savagely beaten in New York's Diamond District, another in Times Square. Police are looking for these suspects. In Los Angeles, a man is being held on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon after an anti-Semitic attack on Jewish diners. 10 cars full of Palestinian supporters rolled up and tried to attack them as they ate outside in Beverly Hills. Police are investigating the incident as a hate crime. In Canada, a Jew attacked in broad daylight. And in Florida, this pro-Palestinian caravan says Hitler was right. Rabbi Abraham Cooper of the Simon Wiesenthal Center.
The language of the caravans that are going through Jewish areas with anti-Semitic slogans being spat, and we're going to rape your wives and children and things like that. There's a sense that it's open season and fair game against Jews.
The Anti-Defamation League has documented anti-Semitism on multiple social media platforms, including 17,000 tweets which used variations of the phrase Hitler was right, and 193 anti-Semitic incidents in the week after the fighting in the Middle East began. Rabbi Cooper says statements by Palestinian supporters in the Democrat Party embolden anti-Semites.
When the squad members openly lie about Israel, use anti-Semitic tropes, knowing they can say whatever they want as elected members of Congress, and that the leadership of Congress won't take them down on that kind of rhetoric, the signals abound that you can get away with it.
And Rabbi Cooper says it's imperative that Christians stand by Jews and speak out strongly against the attacks, and that the White House must do more to stop it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Here's more with Rabbi Abraham Cooper about this alarming rise of anti-Semitism, not only in the U.S., but around the world. Rabbi Cooper, what's your reaction to the anti-Semitic attacks in the U.S. from New York all the way to where you are in Los Angeles?
Actually, the tsunami started first in Germany, where they had attacks across the country. Hearing in the streets of Germany, "Death to Jews," has a special added component. In Dusseldorf, there was even a fire started at a memorial to the Dusseldorf synagogue that was arsoned on Kristallnacht in 1938. The situation in the UK is completely out of control. The type of attacks going on both sides of the Atlantic, and you can throw in Australia as well. It's a kind of perfect storm, extremely disconcerting. This is an anti-Semitism really escalating on a whole nother level.
Final question, Rabbi Cooper, how can evangelical Christians help?
I think, first and foremost, that next Sunday, there needs to be using the sermon to educate the parishioners, first, not so much about Israel. You don't really have to. They're light years ahead of everybody else. but about the scourge of anti-Semitism in the United States that's really out of control. Their prayers will be very important. And then the other thing is to remember what so many people, including Mr. Wiesenthal, our namesake, the great Nazi hunter, would always remind us that it often starts with Jews, it never ends with Jews. Our best friends are members of the Christian community. We just need them to be themselves, to be aware of what's going on, and to report to us what they see online and what they hear. We're never going to defeat anti-Semitism alone. It's going to be our neighbors who are going to lead the way.
For 11 days, Hamas, aided by Iran and other terror groups, tried to paralyze central and southern Israel by firing thousands of rockets from Gaza. Now strategists are looking for other potential threats, and one Israeli expert points to the north as a much bigger threat.
I have to admit that as an Israeli, this is not the only front that I'm concerned of. I look north and I see Lebanon and I see Hezbollah.
Counterterrorism expert Boaz Ganor tells CBN News Hezbollah and its estimated 150 to 200,000 missiles represents a far greater threat than Hamas.
If you ask me what concerns me with Hezbollah, everything that concerned me with Hamas, but big time, much more than what we had.
After studying the recent war, Ganot believes Hezbollah would try to overwhelm Israel's #1 defense, the Iron Dome. Ganor also points out Hezbollah possesses not just rockets, but missiles.
What's the difference between a missile and a rocket? A missile is a guided rocket. You can guide it, you can direct it to the targets. So they have guided missiles with much, much bigger warheads, and they cover all the territory of Israel. They can launch rockets from Lebanon and hit Eilat, which is the most southern part of Israel.
CBN News has reported on Hezbollah's facilities inside Beirut that convert its rockets into guided missiles. It's all part of a multi-billion-dollar Iranian project.
Iran have built this enormous capability for one purpose, and in my view, one purpose only: to deter Israel from attacking the nuclear facilities that they build in Iran.
Ganor, like most Israelis, takes Iran at its word regarding the desire to eradicate Israel.
They are saying that loud and clear. Once they can meet their ideological goals with practical capabilities like a nuclear bomb, that's an existential threat to Israel. Should bear in mind how small Israel cannot observe one nuclear bomb and recover out of it.
Ganor says Hezbollah represents an unprecedented challenge to Israel and that any war against it would dwarf the recent conflict with Hamas.
I believe that Hezbollah would cause much more damage and much more casualties in the numbers of hundreds, if not thousands. In that case, no doubt in my mind that the Israeli government and the Israeli military and the Israeli public would expect the Israeli government to do whatever they can in order to prevent those atrocities against Israel in a much lesser restrictive manner than Israel done in Gaza.
While the U.S. seeks to re-enter the Iranian nuclear deal, the chief of the UN nuclear watchdog says Iran is now enriching uranium at levels only reached by countries seeking atomic weapons. As that clock speeds up, it could be just a matter of time until Israel sees this northern border threat come to fruition. Coming up, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledges aid to Gaza, but will it actually help Hamas's war against Israel? U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited the region, including meetings with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. During the recent conflict, Hamas and Islamic Jihad inside Gaza pounded Israeli towns and cities with more than 4,000 rockets. And now more evidence is emerging that Iran is the source of most of those rockets. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told Secretary of State Blinken he hoped the U.S. will not renew the nuclear deal with Iran, and that if necessary, Israel will chart its own course.
We also reiterated that whatever happens, Israel will always reserve the right to defend itself against a regime committed to our destruction, committed to getting the weapons of mass destruction.
Blinken came with a message to rebuild Gaza.
The United States will work to rally international support around that effort while also making our own significant contributions. We'll work with our partners closely with all to ensure that Hamas does not benefit.
For many, it's an open question to see how U.S. and international aid can rebuild Gaza without benefiting Hamas. Israeli attorney Netzana Darshan-Leitner is a pioneer in the legal fight against terror funding.
Unfortunately, the United States did not learn the lesson that any money they are giving to Gaza goes directly to Hamas and creates and funnels the next round, the next attacks against Israel.
Blinken also met with PA President Mahmoud Abbas and pledged more U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority. It's all part of the Biden administration's effort to renew negotiations for a two-state solution and work with Abbas, currently in the 15th year of a 4-year term. Abbas canceled elections several weeks ago. After the conflict, Hamas's leader gave much of the credit to Iran.
And I cannot but thank those who brought forth money and weaponry to the valiant resistance, the Islamic Republic of Iran, who did not hold back money, weapons, or technical support.
The leader of the second largest terror group inside Gaza, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also praised Iran.
I'm not sorry. I'm proud to say that the rockets that are used to pound Tel Aviv have an Iranian signature on them, the signature of Qasem Soleimani.
During the conflict, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu displayed an Iranian drone intercepted on the Jordanian border.
And that, I think, says everything on the true patron of terror in the Middle East and in the world, Iran.
It's this flagrant support of Hamas and other terror groups in the region that led 44 Republican senators to send a letter to President Biden to suspend its nuclear talks with the Islamic regime. Many, like former Israeli ambassador to the U.S. Ron Dermer, are concerned sanctions relief would enable Iran to export its terror throughout the region.
Iran is stirring the pot in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Gaza. That's all of Iran's terror proxies in the region, which is another reason, while this is going on in Gaza, we shouldn't lose sight of who the big enemy is, Iran. I hope very much that the U.S. administration will not go back into the dangerous nuclear deal with Iran, and that will continue to keep the pressure on that Iranian regime that represents a threat to us, it represents a threat to our Arab neighbors, and it represents a threat to peace throughout the region.
The United Nations Human Rights Council called for the creation of a permanent commission of inquiry to monitor Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. It's the first commission of inquiry with an ongoing mandate. And Mark Regev, a senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, called it a shameful day for the UN.
Not only do they defame a democracy that is simply trying to protect its people from terrorist attack, but they shamelessly whitewash a brutal genocidal terrorist organization that not only tries to kill Israeli civilians, but abuses Gaza's civilian population, exploiting it as a human shield. That's a double war crime.
Up next, an exclusive interview with Israel's ambassador to the United Arab Emirates. As we showed you, in the wake of the recent Israel-Hamas war, anti-Israel and anti-Semitic incidents have spiked around the world. But as CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl shows, the relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, formalized in the Abraham Accords, are growing.
Ambassador Eitan Naeh is Israel's first diplomat to the United Arab Emirates. CTN News spoke with Naeh on a trip to Abu Dhabi regarding the reaction of the UAE to the recent conflict with Hamas.
I visited the salon here during the campaign, the Gaza campaign. And I heard the things that I don't think that Israelis heard before. So the whole time until the Abraham Accords, we only got one side, the Palestinian side. And now for the first time, we can hear the other side, the Israeli side.
Last year, Israel, the UAE, and other Arab countries established diplomatic ties known as the Abraham Accords. Naeh described those ties as an effort by what he called the people of tomorrow to depart from the rocket-firing people of yesterday.
It doesn't mean that there are not that many people who will try to challenge it, who will try to test it, but I think that the determination is here, the strategic decision is here, and we are back to normal, to build relations, to sign agreements, to create contacts, to build our embassy here. So we are continuing, and that's the messages we get from our Emirati counterparts.
In the last 7 months, Nae said, Israel has been able to advance the idea that there are two sides to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He said the Foreign Ministry's Arabic pages on social media had 56 million views in the last few days.
The Israeli narrative, in spite of what seemed to be to the contrary, is getting traction in the Arab street. And I think we should pay attention to that.
One sign of the growing relationship is the opening of the first ever Holocaust memorial exhibit in the Arabian Gulf in a museum in Dubai.
I think it's very important to recognize and acknowledge, and to have the compassion and to have the courage also to acknowledge this negative history that happened at that time, history of the massacre, of ethnic cleansing, singling one ethnicity, one religion. This was very, very bad.
Nae, as well as the Jewish community, were invited to the opening.
As we can see with this exhibition, is the exact opposite of what we see in Gaza. Tolerance, the whole normalization process, a departure from the past, from the wars and the battles and the rockets firing.
The exhibit at the Crossroads of Civilizations Museum is designed to raise awareness among local Emiratis and others. It explores the events leading up to the Holocaust and includes a tribute to the Arab heroes who defended and saved Jews. Nae said it's important to recognize that the Middle East is in a different place, to embrace it and nurture those relations. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates.
Coming up, Jerusalem says goodbye to one of its greatest archaeologists, that some called the Queen of Jerusalem archaeology. For the first time in more than a year, Israel welcomed its first tour group. It's part of a pilot program by the tourism ministry to reopen Israel following the coronavirus pandemic.
It is a very exciting day for me, and we're starting like a pilot of a few weeks where we will experiment the best process to bring in groups of tourists and later on even individual tourists so we can go back to normal.
It's incredible. We've been hoping to come out here for a really long time, and it's just a massive blessing to be here. And just to be where Jesus was, that's just incredible.
Thanks for working so hard to be so safe for us, and we're very grateful to be here.
Finally, family, friends, and colleagues are mourning one of Jerusalem's most well-known and beloved archaeologists, Eilat Mazar. Called by some the Queen of Jerusalem archaeologist, Mazar discovered some of the most significant finds in the city. And CBN News interviewed Mazar a number of times throughout the years. Here's a look at some of those stories. Eilat Mazar was a third-generation archaeologist. Mazar's grandfather, Benjamin, oversaw the first excavation after the 1967 Six-Day War that reunited Jerusalem.
My grandfather excavated 10 continuous years without stopping. This was a fantastic project. Almost no parallel in dimensions. Hundreds of people worked. They revealed fantastic remains of ancient Jerusalem from all periods.
At 10 years old, Mazar felt like part of her family came home when she first heard that Israel recaptured the old city.
Even as a child, I could sense that this is a huge event. It's like you get something back. People related to it like returning a lost son. That's what we were expecting for. Now it's happening.
She made some of Israel's greatest finds. While digging in the city of David, Mazar believes she discovered King David's palace.
Its monumentality is obvious. Everybody can see. Also its date, constructed sometime around 1000 BC, the time of King David in general, based on the pottery that we found underneath and within. These facts brought us to understand that we've got fantastic monumental construction.
Mazar also uncovered the site called the Ophel, just below Jerusalem's Temple Mount, restored it, and told her story in the book, Discovering the Solomonic Wall in Jerusalem. Perhaps Mazar's greatest find brought the Bible to life.
From the biblical times, finding the seal impression from King Hezekiah himself, This is unparalleled, unheard of, to come as close as you can imagine to a biblical figure, not to mention such a king as King Hezekiah. So to find his seal impression, it's almost touching him.
For Mazar, it was the discovery of a lifetime.
Astonished. This was, I think, this was most amazed find for me personally, ever.
While many archaeologists dismiss the Bible, Mazar maintained it to be an important historical source.
The biblical stories and the New Testament story, by the way, it goes together because they just prove quite accurately the development of Jerusalem, and the way Jerusalem is described is quite accurate. And I'm amazed to see repeatedly that archaeological evidence goes so beautifully along with the biblical story. It just repeatedly showing us that so much of the biblical narratives are accurate. Simply as that, accurate.
Since a child, Jerusalem and its treasures captured her heart.
I come in the morning and go to sleep with Jerusalem. I mean, excavating Jerusalem, it's 100% on my mind. Besides my family, I mean, you know, we are very family people.
Former ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, called Mazar a hero.
She has fought for Israel's future by fighting for its past, and against the face of a lot of naysayers, and particularly people in the world today who deny a historical connection between Israel and the city of Jerusalem, people who deny there ever was a King David or a King Hezekiah or a prophet Isaiah. Elat digs down and she finds it and she proves them all wrong.
Archaeology is not just about revealing the past. Archaeology is about securing our present. Archaeology is about ensuring our future. Archaeology is about richness, and as Elat Mazar will tell you, it's about truth.
Elat Mazar was a dear friend to the CBN family. We will miss her, and may her memory be blessed. I'm Chris Mitchell,